At the end of August, we did a question box service. You may remember you all were able to submit questions that Jeannie and I answered. And one of you asked about my journey to single motherhood. The question was phrased very kindly, inviting me to share more of my story. And I will do that in time, I promise, though the story is actually pretty simple. And it's no secret. There is no shame in my choices, and my family's policy has always been honesty so that my children understand there's nothing about how they came into this world that they need to feel secretive about. So I do recognize how annoying it is for me to say, I'll tell you about this another time, but preacher's prerogative this morning. Today, what I do want to do, though, is share just one small part of my journey as a single mother. Even as one with all the privileges that come from being a white, cisgendered, heterosexual, middle-class, educated woman with financial stability, I have been subject to criticism, prying questions, very unlike the one of you submitted, and judgment. When I first got pregnant with my oldest, peers in my doctoral program compared using donor sperm to engaging in eugenics. Men have blatantly and subtly been infuriated by my choice because somehow it makes them feel obsolete. And I can't remember how many times I've been asked why I didn't adopt when there are so many children in need. A reasonable question, but I always respond by asking if they ask that same question of their partnered friends who chose to have children. The term used for women who opt to get pregnant without a partner via insemination or IVF is single mother by choice. So I've been in the single mother by choice game for over a decade now, and I don't really have big feelings anymore when I get those questions. So I share this not from a place of woundedness, but rather to illuminate this one small corner of the reproductive justice movement, this one corner that I am personally intimately acquainted with. One of the many corners in which judgment, self-righteous promotion of one way of doing things is foisted onto others in order to create shame and embarrassment. And really, we begin there with the idea, maybe new to some of you, that reproductive justice has many corners. It is more than just about abortion. In the reading that Carol shared from the UUA's Statement of Conscience on Reproductive Justice from 2015, we heard a bit about the breadth of that term. This is where we're going to share a video, so folks in Anderson, bear with me. I think you're going to be able to hear the audio, fingers crossed. You won't see it, but hopefully you'll hear it. It's from an organization in our own voice, and it helps to sort of explain and deepen our understanding of that term, reproductive justice. So we're going to give this a try.
Reproductive justice. A lot of people talk about it, but many don't know what it really means. Here's the basic idea. Coined by 12 Black women in June of 1994, the term is the combination of two phrases, reproductive rights and social justice. The new phrase reflected the lives and experiences of Black women in the United States who had been denied a full range of services and protections. Black women have multiple identities, like age, ability, sexual orientation, immigration status, religion, and nationality, just to name a few. Consider the fact that Black women experience some of the highest rates of poverty and only make 63 cents for every dollar a white man makes. Nearly 20% of Black women have no health insurance and die 4 times as often as white women from pregnancy-related causes, regardless of income or educational status. The issue at play here is intersectionality, a term coined by legal scholar Kimberly Crenshaw, which refers to how multiple systems of oppression work together. Reproductive justice is how we take on all the systems that harm us. Reproductive justice is the human right that can only be achieved when all women and girls have the complete economic, social, and political power and resources to make healthy decisions about our bodies, our families, and our communities in all areas of our lives. Reproductive justice centers the leadership and lived experiences of the most vulnerable, including but not limited to Black women, women of color, LGBTQ people, and youth. So there you have it. Reproductive justice has given thousands of women a framework to change policy, improve services, collaborate with other social justice movements towards our collective liberation. For more information, contact In Our Own Voice at www.blackrj.org. Thanks for watching, and welcome to the movement.
So we Unitarian Universalists didn't always use that term, reproductive justice. For a long time, reproductive rights or reproductive choice were the way that we spoke about these things, and for many, it really was a focus on abortion access and rights. Reproductive justice, as the video/audio tells us, pulls into the equation a whole different set of layers. It pulls in that intersectionality, referencing the ways that race, economics, gender, and so much more impact the kind of choices, rights, care, and liberty people have. It pulls into the conversation not just abortion, but access to sexual education, contraceptives, and proper maternal care. It pulls into conversation the right to have children or not have children, the right to have children safely and humanely while imprisoned. It pulls into the question issues of gender and sexuality and healthcare and the right to bodily autonomy, self-determination, and safety. The 2015 statement by the UUA advanced our collective understanding of what was at stake in this conversation, moving us Unitarian Universalists from a focus on reproductive rights to reproductive justice. And that statement of conscience was the culmination of quite a bit of work that some of you might not realize originated here in this congregation with Carol and a few others. I want to give you a little bit of that history in case you don't know it. So a little history and context for the work that this congregation did. The Unitarian Universalist Association has a process by which individual congregations can create and recommend issues for consideration by the whole of our body. These are called CSAIs, Congregational Study Action Issues. Per the UUA website, quote, congregational study action issues are issues selected by Unitarian Universalist member congregations for 4 years of study, reflection, and action. Statements of conscience are developed from CSAIs and feedback from congregations on them. So this means that 2015 statement of conscience was the result of 4 years of congregations around the country educating themselves, taking action, and offering feedback on the issue of reproductive justice. And the congregational study action issue proposal that gave rise to the statement of conscience was born right here at the Unitarian Society of Ridgewood in our Reproductive Justice Committee. It was this congregation that proposed that our whole denomination take on reproductive justice as an issue and eventually make a bold statement about our collective support for it. The year that USR proposed this particular CSAI, there were others, as there always are, and a pretty massive campaign took place to try to ensure that the reproductive justice CSAI won the day. And I suspect that many of us, including me, don't really understand what all it took to get this issue to the front of the line. But between Carol, another member, Mandy, Reverend Rob Keithan, and other supporters, it happened, and it opened up a whole new world to many Unitarian Universalists. A world of viewing abortion as one piece among many and adopting this broader lens of reproductive justice. So I grew up with the idea of pro-choice and pro-life dominating the reproductive rights, health, justice conversation. But I came up through UU religious education, so I had some vague notion of other things, fostered by AYS, which was About Your Sexuality, which was the precursor to Our Whole Lives. If you don't know, Our Whole Lives is the UU and UCC joint curriculum, which educates children at church on Sunday mornings about their health, safety, their bodies, sex. My AYS class at church gave me a deep belief in the need for and appropriateness of thorough and values-driven sexual education beyond the perfunctory one we were getting in school. And I can tell you that even with AYS, all of my friends asked me. Nothing that we got in school penetrated, but they came to me and they wanted to know the answers. And that happens with our Whole Lives kids too. And I might not have articulated it like this then, but AYS, for all its horrifying slideshows, and they were bad, AYS did make me understand that accurate information was my right as a growing human. But still, the questions out in the world about reproductive rights were not about access to sexual education. They were not about access to maternity care or why women of color are 4 times more likely to die in childbirth. They were not questions about why we shouldn't judge another person's choice to have children or not. The questions and debates were always, would you ever get an abortion? Are you pro-choice? When does life begin? Abortion was front and center, perhaps for obvious reasons. No matter how much time goes by, abortion rights are attacked over and over again. Abortion rights in this country really begin tied up together with other reproductive justice issues if we actually look at the history. In 1965, the Supreme Court made a decision in the case Griswold v. Connecticut. Now, in that case, the state of Connecticut wanted to ban contraceptives for married people. Their argument had something to do with adultery and tacitly to do with the creation of children and also the ending of pregnancies. And the Supreme Court determined that banning contraceptives or prohibiting doctors from providing accurate information to married couples about their contraceptive choices was unconstitutional, citing in this case an inferred right to privacy built into the Bill of Rights. That case laid the groundwork for Roe v. Wade, which was decided in 1973 and made use of that inferred right to privacy. So in Roe v. Wade, the court determined that a woman has a right to privacy over her personal decisions, but also that at a certain point, the state has a vested interest in protecting the life of a child. So that case established that in the first trimester, a woman's right to privacy is absolute, but that in later trimesters, a state can by law regulate more tightly, restrict the circumstances under which abortions are legal. So in time, that first versus later trimester breakdown gets adjusted and the interpretation moves to a question of viability. Can the fetus survive on its own outside the body? That question of when life begins, when is it viable, that's the question I remember debating with peers in the early 90s. It's when is the fetus viable outside the womb, or is it some other moment that a soul enters? And of course, that question is entirely subjective and changes with science, right? Viability outside the womb changes as our technology changes. But I would argue that that very question is something of a red herring, and I promise we're going to return to that. The thing is that over the past decades, there have arisen many different kinds of challenges to the law as established by the court's interpretation and ruling in Roe v. Wade. Sometimes the assault on the right to have an abortion comes from creating laws that attack sideways, right? Making it so onerous to run a clinic, for example, that it basically makes abortion access impossible, especially for those without the privileges of money and insurance. Sometimes the assault comes more directly through laws that attempt to claim viability or humanness earlier, like the Mississippi case that's coming up soon that tries to restrict all abortions to 15 weeks or less, disallowing any after that time, regardless of why it might be needed. And certainly, I am sure you have heard about the Texas law that recently passed, and that's already facing a challenge, thankfully. The Texas law really does both come sideways and head on. It attempts to define life as beginning with the heartbeat, and I put that in quotes because it's not really a heartbeat, that is detectable at 6 weeks, and attempts to make aiding abortions a crime. So it goes both sideways and head on. And it seeks to make aiding abortions a crime by allowing private citizens to sue other private citizens for giving someone a ride to an abortion or providing care during, before, or after an abortion. The Texas law has been hailed as a triumph for folks who claim that title of pro-life. It's a success, they say, that stands in a long line of challenges to Roe v. Wade. Abortion seems an ever unsettled issue in our country, or perhaps better put, an issue that even when settled is still vulnerable to rhetoric, religious fanaticism, fear-mongering, and thus challenge. It's understandable why it takes center stage so often in our debates about reproductive justice, because it comes under fire so often. But if we're honest, part of why it takes center stage is because it's been made a centerpiece by folks who aren't interested in the intersectionality of the conversation, aren't interested or invested in LGBTQ rights to access and care, or the maternal mortality rate of folks of color, or any of the rest of it. They're interested in drawing a very hard and clear line between what they view as right and wrong. And the language that we use is so indicative of that. From the time I was young, those were the terms, pro-life and pro-choice, and I have always bristled at them, and I know that many of you do as well. The use of the term pro-life by anti-abortion folks suggests that those of us who believe abortion should be legal, safe, and fully funded are anti-life. The religious right has claimed this identity of being pro-life, though in the same breath, many on the religious right also support the death penalty and decry social programs that support life that already exists. They claim this identity as if to say that any other way of thinking about these issues means one denies the sanctity of life. Now, I don't know about you, but I, for one, consider myself a full supporter of life, deeply aware of the sanctity and holiness of each individual, and still, I absolutely support a person's right to choose how, when, and under what circumstances to terminate a pregnancy. The names we have are laden with religious and political oomph, and more to the point, they are laden with value judgments, ones created by those who would restrict a person's right to bodily autonomy. And so we come back to my little corner because it's indicative of the bigger fundamental problem. Pro-life folks believe that they have a right to tell others how to live, how to manage their bodies and their choices. They believe they know what's best for others, and they judge and shame and try and dictate. We find that in the anti-abortion rhetoric, but we also find it at the heart of doctors who disbelieve pregnant folks of color when they express a need for care. We find it at the heart of those who would deny medical care to LGBTQ folks or would refuse to let them make choices about their own bodies and their reproductive organs. We find it in cases like Griswold v. Connecticut or in the anti-sex education policies across the country that deny folks accurate information about their bodies and how to best protect themselves. We find it in those who would deny a rape or incest victim the right to not give birth to the product of violence and violation. And this is why the when life begins question is a diversion. It pretends that what's at stake is the fetus, but when we look at the picture altogether, what's really at stake is a right to privacy, to self-determination, and to bodily autonomy. We Unitarian Universalists are so committed to each individual's spiritual and theological journey and discovery. We routinely talk about our individual right to search for what is true for us, about our theological diversity, and about our openness. We argue all the time that assuming no harm to others, we are not bad or wrong for thinking for ourselves and seeking the truths we know. And there's a parallel here. Our values and faith call us to understand a person as whole, mind, spirit, and body. We believe in the right to ask questions and seek answers. We believe in the right to believe what we will about God and the world, and we believe in the right to make decisions for our own bodies, whether that be to align our gender expression with our gender identity with our body, or to have children or not have children, and to not be shamed or judged wrong for any of it. We believe that everyone has a right to determine what is best for the body they live in, and that no one can dictate that to us. We need to care about the laws in places like Texas and Mississippi and Georgia, not only because they will restrict abortion access for, in particular, the most vulnerable populations there, but because they cut at the core of our shared values, and they will set precedents that can be used to undermine our values further. We need to care because the national conversation has to move on from being just about abortion to being about the whole of reproductive justice. And we aren't going to get where we need to be until we can wrest the righteous positioning from the conservative religious right and step in with a values-driven, faith-filled, righteous vision of our own that promotes abortion, access to care for all, the promotion of accurate and clear sexual education, the widespread provision of birth control, and so much more. We have to care, and we have to do something. So I don't always leave you with a laundry list of things to do, but today I am going to, so listen up. There really is so much that you can do, and as always, I will remind you that each and everything on the list I am about to give you matters. We each have spheres of influence beginning right inside us. So whatever makes sense for you on this list, that's what I'm asking you to do, okay? So you can educate yourself on reproductive justice by following organizations like Sister Song, In Our Own Voice, and other reproductive justice advocates on social media, staying up to date with them on their websites, supporting their work. You can work to deepen your own self-understanding and self-awareness, shifting your perspective and changing your language and the way that you ask questions. You can volunteer and train to become an escort, someone who walks with folks to the abortion clinic to help support and protect them from the frequent and abusive protesters. You can support organizations like the New Jersey Abortion Access Fund. Ask Carol about it. That is her baby, and she will tell you all about it. You can learn more about the bill that Governor Murphy's been urging the New Jersey State Legislature to pass. It's the Reproductive Freedom Act, and it would expand and protect access to birth control and to abortions here in New Jersey. You can learn more about and support Thrive, the organization that created that Reproductive Freedom Act. And you can find one of the numerous marches or actions being taken over the next few weeks to oppose the Texas law and to promote reproductive justice in our nation. Our Unitarian Universalism calls us not only to talk about justice here on Sunday mornings, but to embody that vision of a better world every day, every way we can. And this is a congregation that knows that knows what it is to do the hard work of developing self-awareness and acting on our values in the broader world. So that's the invitation today. Broaden your understanding, lean further into your Unitarian Universalism, and get to work on changing the world so that each and every person is valued and their choices honored as a whole human, mind, spirit, and body.